My name is Magret. I'm 67 years old, and at my daughter-in-law's funeral, my son walked into the church holding another woman's hand. Let that sink in for a moment. His wife, the mother of his newborn child, supposedly lying cold in a casket at the front of that church, and he walks in with his mistress like he's attending a goddamn garden party. Not even the decency to hide it. Not even the basic human shame to wait a week, a month, a year. No. He brought her to the funeral. He walked down that center aisle with her hand in his, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her black dress probably bought the day before, her high heels clicking on the marble floor. Everyone turned to stare. I watched faces transform from sympathy to shock to disgust. I watched phones come out, watched people start recording. I watched my son's performance fall apart before the main act even started. But when her voice echoed through that church a few minutes later, every single person froze. I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand something first. I had been preparing for that moment for weeks. Planning it. Orchestrating every single detail like the most important production of my life. Because it was. It was the day I would stand up in front of everyone I knew, everyone my son knew, and expose him for the monster he had become. Every morning I woke up and reviewed the plan. Every night I lay awake imagining how it would unfold. I practiced my speech in the mirror until I could deliver it without my voice shaking. I reviewed the evidence until I had every detail memorized. I played out every possible scenario, every way David might react, every escape route he might try to take. I knew what my son thought he had gotten away with. Murder. Cold, calculated, premeditated murder. He thought he was clever. He thought he had covered his tracks. He thought his own mother was too old, too trusting, too desperate for his love to see what he was doing. He thought I was just a lonely widow who would do anything to keep her only child in her life. He thought I loved him more than I loved the truth. He thought blood was thicker than justice. He was wrong about all of it. But I also knew something he didn't. I knew she was alive. I knew his victim was breathing, healing, and waiting for the exact right moment to walk back into his life and destroy everything he'd built on her supposed grave. I knew that while he was planning how to spend his $3 million, while he was texting his mistress about their future together, while he was playing the grieving widower on social media, his supposedly dead wife was recovering in a safe house 3 states away. Nursing her son. Getting stronger. Preparing to come back from the grave and haunt him for the rest of his miserable life. You're probably wondering what kind of mother does this. What kind of woman spends weeks plotting to send her own son to prison? What kind of heartless bitch chooses a stranger over her own flesh and blood? I've asked myself that question 1,000 times. I've lain awake at night wrestling with it, crying over it, hating myself for it. I've stared at pictures of David as a little boy and wondered where that child went, how he became this, if I could have stopped it. I've questioned every decision I ever made as a mother. Every time I gave him money when I should have said no. Every time I made excuses for him when I should have held him accountable. Every time I chose to believe his lies because the truth was too painful. But then I remember Emily's face. I remember the way she looked lying on my couch, barely able to keep her eyes open, her skin the color of ash, while my son fed her poison and told her it was medicine. I remember the trust in her voice when she called me mama. I remember holding her hand while she gave birth, knowing that if I didn't act, she would die within weeks. And then the question becomes easy. Let me tell you exactly what kind of mother I am. My name is Magret Elizabeth Morrison. I'm a widow. My husband Thomas died 7 years ago from pancreatic cancer, the kind that takes you fast and brutal, no time for long goodbyes. I remember the day we got the diagnosis. We'd gone to the doctor because Thomas had been having stomach pains. Nothing serious, we thought. Maybe an ulcer. Maybe stress from work. The doctor was a young woman, couldn't have been more than 35, and I watched her face as she looked at the scan results. I knew before she said anything. I'd seen that expression before, that mix of professional composure and human devastation. Mr. Morrison, I'm afraid it's pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. It's quite advanced. Thomas held my hand and asked the only question that mattered. How long? 3 to 6 months. Maybe less. I'm so sorry. He lived 4 months and 13 days. I counted every single one. Watched the strongest man I'd ever known waste away to nothing. Watched cancer eat him alive from the inside out. Held him through the pain, through the morphine haze, through the final days when he barely knew who I was. The last thing he said to me, 2 hours before he died, was, "Maggie, don't let David take advantage of you when I'm gone. Promise me." I promised. And then he closed his eyes and never opened them again. But I'm not here to talk about Thomas's death. I'm here to talk about what I learned in the 33 years before it. I'm a retired financial administrator. For 33 years, I worked at Henderson and Associates, one of the largest accounting firms in the state. I didn't push papers around. I didn't file documents and answer phones. I investigated financial fraud. I was part of a specialized team that examined contracts, traced money, found discrepancies, and built cases against people who thought they were too smart to get caught. I hunted down discrepancies in million-dollar contracts, the kind where someone changed a decimal point and hoped nobody would notice. The kind where clauses were added after signatures, where dates were backdated, where entire sections were forged so perfectly that most people would never see the subtle differences in ink color or pen pressure. I could spot a forged signature from across a room. Could tell you within seconds if a document had been altered. I could look at someone's financial records and see the story they were trying to hide, the mistress they were paying off, the gambling debts they were covering, the embezzlement they thought was untraceable. I could tell when someone was lying about their expenses just by the way they shuffled their receipts. The hesitation. The forced casualness. The details that were too perfect, too rehearsed. Liars always give themselves away. Always. They can't help it. I was good at my job. Damn good. I found patterns where other people saw chaos. I saw intent where others saw mistakes. I understood that people are creatures of habit, and when those habits suddenly change, when the person who's always been sloppy suddenly becomes meticulous, or when the detail-oriented person suddenly makes careless errors, something is wrong. The partners used to joke that nothing got past Magret Morrison. Nothing. They'd bring me cases that had stumped everyone else. Cases where the fraud was so sophisticated, so carefully planned, that it seemed impossible to prove. And I'd sit at my desk with my reading glasses and my red pen and I'd find it. Every time. I put away embezzlers, insurance fraudsters, tax evaders, corporate criminals. I testified in court 43 times. 43 times I sat in that witness stand and explained to a jury exactly how I knew someone was lying. 43 times I watched guilty people realize they weren't as smart as they thought they were. That skill didn't retire when I did. When I left Henderson and Associates at 63, after Thomas died, they threw me a party. Gave me a plaque. Told stories about the cases I'd cracked. One of the senior partners said, "Magret Morrison is the reason criminals lose sleep at night. She sees everything. She forgets nothing. And she never, ever gives up." I kept that plaque. It's in my study. Right next to Thomas's medical journals. Sometimes I look at it and wonder if that version of me is still in there somewhere, the woman who could look at a stack of documents and see the truth hidden underneath. I found out she is. For the last 7 years, I've lived alone in the house Thomas and I bought 42 years ago. It's a 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knows everyone else's business. The kind of place where people still bring you casseroles when someone dies and remember your birthday even though you're not related. The kind of place where Mrs. Henderson next door still asks about David every time she sees me, and I have to smile and make excuses for why he doesn't visit. The kind of place where the mailman knows your name and the local kids trick or treat at your door even though you haven't had children at home in decades. The house is too big for one person. 4,000 square feet of memories and empty rooms and furniture that nobody sits in anymore. Thomas's study is exactly as he left it. His reading glasses still on his desk, folded on top of a journal article about new cancer treatments, research that came too late to save him. His medical journal stacked by his chair, organized by date because Thomas organized everything. His coffee mug, washed but never put away, sitting on the windowsill where he left it the last morning he went to work. I dust them every week, but I don't move them. Can't move them. Because moving them would mean accepting that he's really gone. That he's never coming back. That I'm going to live in this house alone until I die. Our bedroom feels massive without him. We used to joke that our bed was too small, that we needed a king instead of a queen because Thomas was 6'3" and took up most of the space. Now it feels endless. I sleep on my side of the bed still, after all these years. His side stays made, untouched, like I'm expecting him to come home from a long shift at the hospital and collapse next to me, smelling like antiseptic and complaining about hospital politics. The guest rooms are frozen in time too. One was for when my mother visited before she passed. It still has her favorite blanket on the bed, her reading lamp on the nightstand. The closet still holds the clothes she kept here, practical dresses and comfortable shoes and cardigans in every color. The other guest room was supposed to be for grandchildren. Thomas and I painted it yellow together, spent an entire weekend arguing about the exact shade because I wanted sunshine yellow and he wanted pale lemon and we compromised on something in between. He refinished a rocking chair he found at a yard sale, sanded it down and stained it oak and made it beautiful. We bought a mobile, little wooden animals that spun in circles, and it sat in its box for 20 years, waiting. That room stayed empty for 2 decades. 20 years of walking past that yellow door and feeling the absence of the grandchildren we thought we'd have by now. 20 years of watching our friends become grandparents, watching them show pictures and tell stories, while that room gathered dust. My days were predictable. Wake at 6. Coffee on the porch, watching the neighborhood come to life. Mr. Patel jogging by with his retriever. The Martinez twins waiting for the school bus. Mrs. Chen tending her garden even in winter, convinced that talking to plants makes them grow better. Read the newspaper cover to cover, the physical paper, delivered to my driveway every morning, because I'm old-fashioned and I like the feeling of newsprint on my fingers. Thomas used to steal the sports section first. Now I read it last, because it reminds me of him. Water the garden Thomas planted. He spent years designing it. Roses along the fence, hydrangeas by the porch, a vegetable garden in the back that produced more tomatoes than 2 people could eat. I've kept it going. Every spring I plant the same vegetables. Every summer I watch them grow. Every fall I harvest them and give most of them away because what's a widow going to do with 30 pounds of tomatoes? Lunch at noon. Usually something simple. Sandwich. Salad. Soup. I eat at the kitchen table, the same seat I've sat in for 40 years, and I leave Thomas's seat empty. Afternoon walk around the neighborhood. 2 miles, the same route every day. Past the park where David played as a child. Past the elementary school he attended. Past the houses of families we've known for decades, families that have grown and changed while mine has just ended. Dinner at 5:30. I still cook full meals, even though it's just me. Pot roast. Chicken. Casseroles. Because if I stop cooking real food, if I start eating cereal for dinner and calling it good enough, that's when I'll know I've given up. Television until 9. I don't even remember what I watch half the time. Game shows. News. Old movies. Anything to fill the silence. Bed by 10. Lie awake until midnight, usually. Stare at the ceiling. Think about Thomas. Think about the life we had. Think about how strange it is to be 67 years old and utterly, completely alone. Weekends I volunteered at the library. Shelving books mostly. Helping people find things, reading to kids during story time. The librarians knew me by name. The children called me Miss Magret. It was nice, feeling useful. Feeling like someone needed me for something, even if it was just to reach books on high shelves. Tuesdays I played bridge with 3 other widows, Patricia, Joan, and Helen. We'd been playing together for 12 years. We understood each other. Understood the specific loneliness of eating dinner alone every single night. Of having entire conversations in our heads because there's nobody to talk to. Of forgetting to buy milk because there's no one to remind us we're out. Of waking up in an emergency and realizing there's nobody to call. We didn't talk about our dead husbands much. That was an unspoken rule. We were there to play cards and laugh and pretend for a few hours that we were still full people instead of the halves that were left behind. Thursdays I had coffee with Patricia, the same Patricia from Bridge, but this was different. This was just us. We'd worked together for 20 years at Henderson and Associates. Retired the same month. Started having coffee the next week and never stopped. Patricia understood me in ways the others didn't. She knew what it was like to spend your career catching liars. To see the worst of human nature up close. To know that people will do terrible things for money, for power, for reasons that make no sense to anyone but them. She was the first person I called when I realized what David was doing. The only person I trusted completely. It was a quiet life. A small life. Some might say a lonely life. And it was. God, it was lonely. The silence in that house was suffocating sometimes. Not the peaceful quiet of contentment. The crushing, oppressive quiet of absence. Of knowing that nobody is coming home. That nobody will call your name from another room. That you can go days without speaking out loud and nobody will notice. I'd find myself talking out loud just to hear a human voice. Okay, Magret, time to water the plants. Let's see what's on TV tonight. That's enough crying for today. Full conversations with myself because the alternative was drowning in silence. I'd leave the television on for company even when I wasn't watching. The background noise of human voices, of laugh tracks and commercials and news anchors, just to fill the void. I'd go to the grocery store at peak hours, Saturday mornings, Sunday afternoons, just to be around people. Just to stand in line behind families buying food for dinners I'd never eat again. Just to hear children laughing and couples arguing about which cereal to buy. Just to remember what it felt like to be part of the living world instead of this ghost drifting through empty rooms. But I'd made peace with it. This was my life now. Thomas was gone. My mother was gone. My father had died when I was 30, heart attack at his desk, dead before the ambulance arrived. I had no siblings. No close cousins. My best friend from college lived in Oregon and we talked maybe twice a year. Just me in that big empty house and all those rooms full of memories that got more painful every year. Just me and the certain knowledge that I would die alone in that house someday, probably weeks before anyone noticed. And then there was my son. David. I need you to understand something about David before I tell you the rest. He wasn't born evil. I didn't raise a monster. I need you to know that because otherwise you'll think I'm making excuses, trying to absolve myself of responsibility. But the truth is more complicated than that. He was a sweet child. God, he was such a sweet child. Curious. Loving. Affectionate. He'd climb into bed with us on Sunday mornings and snuggle between Thomas and me, smelling like shampoo and childhood. He'd bring me flowers from the neighbor's garden, flowers he definitely shouldn't have picked, Mrs. Henderson's prize roses usually, with this enormous proud smile on his face. For you, Mommy. Because you're pretty. He'd make me breakfast for Mother's Day. Burnt toast and scrambled eggs that were somehow both raw and overcooked. Thomas would stand in the doorway trying not to laugh while David presented it to me on a tray like it was a Michelin star meal. He loved dinosaurs. Read every book about them he could find. Could recite facts about velociraptors and T-Rexes with perfect 7-year-old confidence. He wanted to be a paleontologist. Had it all planned out, he'd discover a new species and name it after me. Magret, he said. The biggest dinosaur ever found. But somewhere along the way, something changed. I can't pinpoint exactly when. There wasn't a moment where I thought, this is it. This is where my son becomes someone I don't recognize. It was gradual. Subtle. The kind of change that happens so slowly you don't notice until you look back and realize the child you knew is gone. It started small. Lies about homework. "I don't have any," he'd say, and then the teacher would call saying he hadn't turned in an assignment in weeks. The teacher lost it, he'd insist, angry that we didn't believe him. "She has it out for me. She hates me." Money started disappearing from my purse. Just a few dollars at first. 5 here, 10 there. I thought I was miscounting. Thomas said I was being forgetful. But I wasn't. I counted my money every morning, had done it for years, a habit from my job. I knew exactly how much I had. When I confronted David, he denied it. Looked me right in the eye with tears streaming down his face and swore he hadn't taken anything. "How could you accuse me, Mom? Your own son. I can't believe you don't trust me." I found the money later, hidden in his room. $37 stuffed inside a shoe. But when I showed him, he had an explanation. He'd been saving his allowance. He'd found it in the parking lot. A friend had paid him back a loan. The story changed each time, but the indignation was always the same. It progressed. Bad grades that were the teacher's fault. She doesn't teach anything. Nobody in the class understands. Everyone's failing. But when we called other parents, their kids were getting A's and B's. Getting cut from teams that were rigged. The coach plays favorites. He only picks his friends' kids. I'm better than half the guys who made it. But at the games, we watched those other boys play, and they were better. They just were. Friends who stopped calling because they were jerks. They're fake. They only pretended to like me. I'm better off without them. But we'd see those kids around town, and they'd look uncomfortable when David's name came up. Later, we'd hear the stories. Money borrowed and never returned. Things that went missing when David visited. Lies told to parents that got the other kids in trouble. It was always someone else's fault. Always. The world was against David. The world didn't understand David. The world was too stupid to recognize David's potential. Thomas saw it before I did. Tried to talk to me about it when David was 15, 16, 17. "Maggie, we need to stop making excuses for him. We need to hold him accountable. He's just going through a phase. All teenagers are difficult. This isn't normal teenager behavior. This is something else. And if we don't address it now, it's going to get worse." But I didn't listen. Couldn't listen. Because listening meant admitting that my son, my sweet little boy who brought me stolen roses, was becoming someone I didn't like very much. High school was rough. David barely graduated. Not because he wasn't smart, he was smart, too smart sometimes, but because he didn't see the point. "School is for sheep," he'd say. "I don't need a diploma to be successful. Look at all these billionaires who dropped out." "Those billionaires dropped out of Harvard," Thomas would argue. "You're barely passing community college courses." The fights escalated. David would scream. Punch walls. Storm out and disappear for days. Come back acting like nothing had happened, like we were crazy for being worried. By the time he was 20, he'd started and quit 3 different colleges. By 22, he'd been through a dozen jobs. Retail, food service, customer service, manual labor. Never lasted more than a few months. Always someone else's fault. The boss was an idiot. The customers were assholes. The work was beneath him. By 25, he'd borrowed money from me that he never paid back. It started with $100 for rent. "I'm a little short this month, Mom. I'll pay you back next week." Then it was $200 for car repairs. Then $500 for medical bills. Then $1,000 for a business venture that would definitely make him rich. I gave it to him. Every time. Because he was my son. Because I wanted to believe this time would be different. Because saying no felt like giving up on him. Thomas begged me to stop. You're not helping him, Maggie. You're enabling him. You're teaching him that there are no consequences. That he can fail and lie and take advantage and Mommy will always bail him out. What am I supposed to do? Let him be homeless? Let him starve? He's not going to be homeless. He's not going to starve. He's 30 years old. He needs to learn to take care of himself. And he never will if you keep rescuing him. But I couldn't stop. Couldn't watch my child struggle and not help. Even when the borrowing turned into thousands. Even when I knew I'd never see that money again. By 30, David had cut off contact for months at a time. He'd call when he needed something, money, usually, or a place to stay, or someone to co-sign a loan he'd never pay back. But otherwise? Silence. Months would go by without a word. No calls on my birthday. No visits on holidays. Just, nothing. I'd see pictures of him on social media sometimes. Living in different cities. Different girlfriends every few months. Jobs that sounded impressive in his posts but never seemed to last. A life that looked full and exciting and completely separate from me. By 35, I'd accepted that I'd lost him. Not to death or distance but to choices. His choices. My choices. The accumulation of years of enabling and excusing and pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Thomas tried to warn me. Over and over, for years, he tried. David is going to break your heart, Maggie. Not on purpose maybe, but he's going to break it. And the longer you let him take advantage of you, the worse it's going to hurt. I should have listened. Thomas died before he could see how right he was. Before he could see what our son became. Maybe that was a blessing. Maybe watching David at the funeral would have killed him faster than the cancer. Because David barely came to Thomas's funeral. Showed up late, 2 hours late, walked in during the eulogy, and left early. Didn't help with any of the arrangements. Didn't call to check on me. Didn't ask if I needed anything. Just showed up, stood in the back, and disappeared before we even got to the cemetery. I found out later he'd been in town the whole week before Thomas died. Staying with a friend. He knew his father was dying. Knew he had days, maybe hours. Could have come to the hospital. Could have said goodbye. He chose not to. After the funeral, after everyone left, after I was alone in that big house with all of Thomas's things and none of Thomas, I called David. Your father wanted to see you before he died. I was busy, Mom. I had work stuff. I couldn't get away. You were in town. Your friend Mark posted pictures of you at a bar on Tuesday. Your father died on Wednesday. Silence on the line. Then, are you seriously guilt-tripping me right now? At my father's funeral? You missed your father's funeral. You showed up 2 hours late. I got stuck in traffic. Jesus, Mom. I'm sorry I'm not perfect. I'm sorry I'm grieving differently than you want me to. Are you grieving at all? Fuck you. He hung up. For 3 years after that, I heard from him maybe twice a year. A phone call on Christmas where he'd talk for 5 minutes and make excuses about why he couldn't visit. Had to work. Had plans. Living too far away. Always something. A text on my birthday, if I was lucky. Happy birthday, Mom. No punctuation. No emoji. Just 3 words that took him 5 seconds to type. I'd given up. I'd accepted that my son was a stranger. That whatever relationship we'd had was gone. That the little boy who brought me flowers and called me Mommy had been replaced by this cold, distant man who saw me as an obligation at best, an ATM at worst. I'd accepted that I would die alone in that house and maybe David would show up to my funeral long enough to see if I'd left him anything in the will. Maybe he'd be late to that too. I'd made my peace with it. With the loss. With the loneliness. With the failure. And then he called. It was a Tuesday in September. I remember because I'd just come home from coffee with Patricia and I was putting away my purse when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. These days, unknown numbers were usually telemarketers or scammers. But something made me pick up. Mom? I hadn't heard his voice in 8 months. 8 months of silence. 8 months of wondering if he was alive or dead or just done with me forever. David? Yeah, Mom. It's me. I need to talk to you. I have some news. My heart sank. Here we go, I thought. He needs money. Or he's in trouble. Or both. Maybe he got arrested. Maybe he needs bail money. Maybe he got someone pregnant and needs to pay for an abortion. With David, it could be anything. What kind of news? Good news. Actually good news for once. I sat down. Actually had to sit down because my legs suddenly felt weak. David didn't call with good news. David called with problems disguised as opportunities that required my money to fix. I'm listening. I got married. The words didn't process at first. Married. David. My son who couldn't hold a job or a relationship or a conversation without lying. My son who'd gone through girlfriends like Kleenex, who'd never brought anyone home to meet me, who'd never mentioned being serious with anyone. You, what? I got married, Mom. Her name is Emily. And she's pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother. I couldn't speak. Couldn't form words. My mind was racing through 1,000 questions. When? Who? Why didn't he tell me? Was this real? Was this another con? Another lie? Another way to manipulate me into giving him something? Mom? Are you there? I'm here. I don't know what to say. Say you're happy for me. Say you want to meet her. Say. His voice cracked. Actually cracked. Say you're proud of me. Please. And God help me, I wanted to believe him. Oh God, how desperately I wanted to believe him. When did you get married? 6 months ago. We got married at the courthouse. It was small. Just us and 2 witnesses. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Everything happened so fast and I wasn't sure how to tell you. I wasn't sure you'd want to know. 6 months. He'd been married for 6 months and hadn't told me. Had kept this enormous life event secret like I was a stranger instead of his mother. Why wouldn't I want to know? Because I've been a shitty son, Mom. I know that. I know I haven't been around. I know I've let you down more times than I can count. I know you probably hate me. I don't hate you, David. I could never hate you. Even after everything? Even after Dad's funeral? Even after 3 years of barely talking? You're my son. That doesn't change. Silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. Could hear emotion in those breaths, real emotion, not the manufactured kind he used when he wanted something. I want to do better, Mom. I want to be better. This baby, it changed everything. I want to be a good father. I want to be the kind of dad that Dad was. I want my child to know their grandmother. I want you to be part of this. I wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly it physically hurt. Wanted to believe that having a child had transformed him, had flipped some switch in his brain and made him capable of being the man I'd always hoped he'd become. When is the baby due? December. We just found out it's a boy. A son. His voice filled with something I hadn't heard in years. Wonder. Joy. I'm going to have a son. A grandson. I was going to have a grandson. After 20 years of that yellow nursery sitting empty, after decades of watching other people's grandchildren and feeling that ache of absence, I was going to be a grandmother. What's her name again? Emily? Emily Grace. She's incredible, Mom. She's kind and patient and everything I don't deserve. She's excited to meet you. She wants to call you Mom too, if that's okay. Her mother died when she was 16 and she doesn't have family really. Just some distant cousins who don't talk to her. My throat was tight. This pregnant girl, wanted to call me Mom. Wanted family. Wanted me. I'd like that, I managed to say. Really? He sounded so relieved. So genuinely happy. That's amazing. She's going to be so happy. Can we come visit? This weekend maybe? I know it's short notice but... Yes. Please. Come this weekend. Saturday? We'll drive up in the morning. Should be there by noon. I'll make lunch. Does Emily have any dietary restrictions? Allergies? No, she eats everything. Well, everything except fish. The smell makes her nauseous now. Pregnancy thing. We talked for another 10 minutes. David told me about his job, manager at a tech company, sounded legitimate for once. Told me about their apartment, small but nice, in a decent neighborhood. Told me about Emily, how they met at a coffee shop, how she'd smiled at him and he'd known immediately that she was special. It sounded real. It sounded genuine. It sounded like maybe, finally, my son had grown up. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and cried. Big, ugly, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep inside. Relief and hope and fear all mixed together. Relief that he'd called. Hope that this was real. Fear that I was being stupid to believe him again. But I did believe him. I wanted to believe him so badly that I ignored every warning sign, every past betrayal, every reason to be skeptical. That was my first mistake. That Saturday, I was up at 5 in the morning. Couldn't sleep, too excited and nervous. I cleaned the house top to bottom even though it was already clean. Vacuumed every room. Dusted every surface. Cleaned windows that didn't need cleaning. I cooked. God, I cooked like I was feeding an army. Thomas's famous lasagna recipe, the one that took all day and used 3 pounds of meat and 2 pounds of cheese. Fresh bread from scratch. Salad with vegetables from the garden. Apple pie because I didn't know what else Emily would like and everyone likes apple pie. I set the dining room table with the good china, the set Thomas and I got for our wedding that we only used on special occasions. Put out cloth napkins and the fancy silverware and fresh flowers from the garden. I opened up that yellow nursery. Dusted everything. Opened the windows to air it out. Pulled that mobile out of its box after 20 years and hung it over where the crib would go. Stood in the doorway and imagined a baby in there, a little boy with David's eyes and Emily's smile, and I cried again. By noon I was pacing. Looking out the window every 30 seconds. Convinced they wouldn't show. Convinced this was another one of David's lies. Convinced I'd made all this food and set the table and opened that nursery for nothing. And then a car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as they got out. David looked good. Really good. He'd gained weight, the healthy kind, not the gaunt hollow-cheeked look he'd had the last time I'd seen him. He was wearing clean clothes that actually fit. His hair was cut and styled. He looked like an adult instead of the overgrown teenager he'd been for the last decade. But it was Emily who took my breath away. She was tiny. So tiny I couldn't imagine how she was carrying a baby in that small frame. Maybe 5'3", couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds even with the pregnancy belly that was clearly visible under her loose dress. She had long dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Brown eyes that looked too big for her face. No makeup. A shy, nervous smile that transformed her entire face when David took her hand. She looked young. Too young. I found out later she was 24, 14 years younger than David. Barely more than a child herself. But there was something about her that seemed older. A quietness. A carefulness. The way she stood slightly behind David, like she was used to being invisible. The doorbell rang and I realized I'd been staring. I smoothed my hair, checked my reflection in the hall mirror, took a deep breath, and opened the door. "Mom." David smiled and it looked real. "This is Emily." Emily stepped forward and extended her hand. "Mrs. Morrison, it's so wonderful to finally meet you." Her voice was soft. Gentle. Almost whisper quiet. I didn't shake her hand. I pulled her into a hug. Felt her stiffen in surprise, then slowly relax. She was so small, so fragile in my arms. I could feel her shoulder blades, could feel how thin she was everywhere except that pregnant belly. "Please," I said, "call me Magret. Or Mama Magret if you'd like." When I pulled back, her eyes were filled with tears. Actual tears that she tried to blink away, embarrassed. "I'd love that," she whispered. "Mama Magret." Something inside my chest cracked open when she said it. This tiny, pregnant girl with no mother of her own was standing in my doorway calling me Mama and looking at me like I was something precious. I led them inside. Gave them the tour even though David knew every inch of this house. But Emily didn't. Emily looked at everything with wide eyes. At the pictures on the walls. At Thomas's study. At the guest room where David used to sleep when he lived here. And then I showed her the nursery. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, just staring. At the yellow walls. At the rocking chair. At the mobile I'd hung that morning. At the empty space waiting to be filled. "You did all this?" she asked quietly. "Thomas and I did. 20 years ago. We thought. I had to stop. Had to breathe. We thought we'd need it eventually. It's beautiful." She walked in. Touched the rocking chair. Spun the mobile gently. Looked at me with those enormous eyes. "May I ask what happened? Why it stayed empty for so long?" David was an only child. And grandchildren just never came. She glanced at David, who was standing in the hallway looking uncomfortable. Then back at me. "Well, it won't be empty anymore. If it's okay with you, I'd love for our son to use this room when we visit. If that's not too presumptuous." "Our son." She said our son. Not my son or the baby. Our son. Including me in it. I would love that more than anything. We spent the afternoon in my kitchen. Emily insisted on helping cook even though I told her she should rest, that she was a guest, that she was pregnant and needed to take it easy. "Please," she said. "I love cooking. And I've been dying to learn family recipes. David talks about your lasagna all the time. David talks about your lasagna." David, who barely talked to me at all for 3 years, had been telling his wife about my cooking. Had been remembering our life together, the good parts, the parts before everything fell apart. We cooked together. I showed her how to layer the lasagna the way Thomas had perfected over 30 years of trial and error. Too much cheese, then just a little more. Sauce between every layer. Let it rest for 20 minutes before cutting or it falls apart. Emily was quiet but attentive. Asked questions. Took mental notes. Told me about how she loved to bake, used to bake with her mother before she died. She had pancreatic cancer, Emily said softly while rolling out pie dough. It was fast. 3 months from diagnosis to the end. I was 16. My senior year of high school. My dad remarried within a year to someone who made it very clear she didn't want a teenage stepdaughter around. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. My husband Thomas died from pancreatic cancer too. 7 years ago. She looked up at me with those big eyes. "David told me. He said you were very strong. That you handled it with grace." "I don't know about grace. I just kept breathing because what else could I do?" "That's grace," she said quietly. We worked in comfortable silence after that. I watched her hands as she crimped pie crust, small hands, delicate fingers, bitten nails. Hands that had known hard work. Later I'd learned she'd worked as a waitress, a housekeeper, a cashier. Whatever paid the bills while she put herself through community college. David sat at the kitchen table and watched us. Told stories about his new job, the apartment, their life together. And for the first time in years, his stories sounded real. Grounded. Like he was actually living a life instead of running from one. "I know I've messed up a lot, Mom," he said at one point while Emily was in the bathroom. "I know I've let you down. Let Dad down. But I'm really trying this time. Emily makes me want to be better. The baby makes me want to be better. I don't want to be that guy anymore." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. They stayed for dinner. They stayed through dessert. When they finally left at 8 o'clock, Emily hugged me at the door and whispered, "Thank you for welcoming me into your family. It means everything." I watched them drive away and I cried. Stood in my doorway and cried like I hadn't cried since Thomas's funeral. My son had come back. He'd brought me a daughter and a grandson. Maybe people really could change. Maybe this was David's redemption arc. Maybe everything was going to be okay. For 6 weeks, it was. David and Emily visited every Sunday. Sometimes they'd come for the whole day. Emily would help me in the garden or we'd work on the nursery together. She wanted my advice on everything: paint colors, furniture, baby names. She showed me ultrasound pictures and held my hand against her belly when the baby kicked. We went shopping for baby clothes. Tiny onesies and little socks and impossibly small hats. Emily had no money, David was the only one working, but I didn't care. I bought everything. I wanted to buy everything. I wanted to give this child everything I'd never gotten to give. David seemed happy. He'd bring flowers sometimes. He'd help around the house without being asked. He talked about the future like it was something real and solid instead of another fantasy he'd abandon when it got hard. I let myself hope. I let myself believe. I let myself imagine Sunday dinners with a high chair pulled up to the table. Birthday parties in the backyard. Teaching my grandson to read in the same chair where I'd taught David. I let my guard down. That was my first mistake. It started small. Little things I almost didn't notice. Emily started looking tired. More than normal pregnancy tired. Exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes. Her hands would shake sometimes when she picked up her coffee cup. "Are you feeling okay?" I asked her one Sunday in November. "Just pregnancy stuff," she said with a weak smile. "The doctor says everything's fine." But she didn't look fine. She looked ill. The next week, she was worse. Pale. Dizzy. She had to sit down twice while we were in the kitchen. I watched her push food around her plate at dinner, barely eating anything. "Emily, honey, you need to eat. You're eating for two." "I know, Mama Magret. I'm just not hungry lately. And when I do eat, I feel sick." David jumped in immediately. "The doctor said morning sickness can last the whole pregnancy for some women. It's normal." But it was November. She was 6 months pregnant. Morning sickness was supposed to be over. The week after that, she could barely stand. She spent most of the visit lying on my couch, her face the color of paste, while David made excuses. "She's anemic. The doctor prescribed iron supplements. She's not sleeping well. Back pain, you know. First pregnancy is always hard. Some women just have it rough." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe this was normal. But I'd worked with pregnant women for 30 years. I'd been pregnant myself. This wasn't normal. This was wrong. I started watching more carefully. Started paying attention to the details the way I used to when I was investigating fraud at the firm. David was always getting her pills. "Time for your vitamins, honey. Don't forget your iron supplement. The doctor said to take this 3 times a day." So many pills. Different bottles. Different sizes and colors. And Emily took them obediently, trustingly, without question. He never let her pour her own drinks. Always brought them to her. Water, juice, tea. Always from the kitchen, never where I could see him prepare them. He was constantly on his phone. Texting. Stepping outside to take calls. Coming back looking stressed or angry. Mail started arriving at my house for them. Bills, mostly. But one caught my eye, envelope from Metropolitan Life Insurance. Why would life insurance mail be coming to my address? And then I overheard it. It was the second Sunday of December. Emily was napping on the couch. I'd gone to the bathroom, and when I came back, I heard David on the phone in the hallway. His voice was low, urgent. I told you, just a few more weeks. Once the baby comes, it'll be over soon. She's getting worse. The doctor doesn't suspect anything. Nobody suspects anything. Pause. My mother is a fucking problem, I know. But she's not going to figure it out. She's old. She sees what she wants to see. Pause. Just be patient. By Christmas, I'll have the insurance money and we can start over. Just us. I promise. I stood frozen in the bathroom doorway. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. My son. My son was planning something. My son was doing something to Emily. Every instinct from 33 years of investigating fraud screamed at me. Every pattern recognition skill I'd ever developed lit up like an alarm. The sudden illness. The mysterious pills. The life insurance. The phone calls. The other woman. Once the baby comes, it'll be over soon. Oh my God. Oh my God, my son was trying to kill his wife. That night, after they left, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through everything I'd seen, everything I'd heard, everything I'd ignored because I wanted so desperately to believe David had changed. I kept replaying the phone call in my head. Every word. Every pause. Every inflection in his voice. Once the baby comes, it'll be over soon. What else could that mean? What innocent explanation could there possibly be? I tried to rationalize it. Tried to find alternative interpretations. Maybe he meant their financial struggles would be over soon. Maybe he meant Emily's suffering would be over soon because she'd finally have the baby and the pregnancy discomfort would end. Maybe I was reading malice into innocent words because I wanted to believe my son was still capable of good. But then I remembered the rest. The doctor doesn't suspect anything. Why would a doctor need to suspect something if nothing suspicious was happening? Nobody suspects anything. Suspects what? What was there to suspect? And the insurance money. By Christmas, I'll have the insurance money. You don't get insurance money unless someone dies. The iron supplements that made her weaker instead of stronger. The vitamins from bottles with no labels that I'd never been allowed to see. The way he controlled everything she ate and drank, never letting her prepare anything herself, always bringing her sealed containers I couldn't check. The life insurance mail arriving at my house so Emily wouldn't see it at their apartment. The phone calls with another woman. A woman he promised a future with. Just us, he'd said. Not us and the baby. Not us and Emily. Just us. Once the baby comes, it'll be over soon. The picture was clear. The pattern was undeniable. I'd spent 33 years finding patterns in financial documents, but this was simpler. This was obvious. He was poisoning her. Slowly. Carefully. Methodically. Making it look like pregnancy complications. And once the baby was born, once he had the child and Emily's death couldn't be blamed on miscarriage or stillbirth, once the life insurance policy was past its contestability period, he was going to accelerate it. Finish what he'd started. My son was a murderer. Not in theory. Not potentially. Not someday if things went wrong. Actually. Right now. At this very moment, he was actively murdering someone. He was murdering this sweet, kind, gentle girl who called me mama and held my hand and trusted me to help her prepare for her baby. This girl who had no family, no support, no one looking out for her except the man who was killing her. This girl who was so trusting, so innocent, that she took whatever pills her husband gave her without question. This girl who was going to die because the only person who could save her was too afraid to act. I got up. Went downstairs. Made coffee even though it was 3 in the morning. My hands were shaking so badly I spilled grounds all over the counter. I didn't clean them up. Just stood there watching the coffee brew, watching my reflection in the dark kitchen window, wondering who the hell I was looking at. I sat at my kitchen table where Emily and I had laughed together just hours before. Where we'd planned the nursery and talked about baby names and imagined the future. Where she'd eaten food I'd prepared, drunk water I'd poured, felt safe because she trusted that her husband's mother wouldn't let anything bad happen to her. And I had to make a choice. The choice was simple on paper. Evil versus good. Murder versus justice. A killer versus his victim. But the killer was my son. My only child. My baby. The little boy who'd brought me stolen roses and made me burnt toast and promised to name a dinosaur after me. If I did what was right, if I exposed him, if I saved Emily, I would destroy David's life. Send him to prison. Take away his freedom, his future, everything. I would be the reason my son died behind bars, alone and hated, remembered only as a monster. And it wouldn't just be David I'd destroy. It would be me too. People would know. Everyone would know. That's Magret Morrison. She turned in her own son. She chose a stranger over her own blood. What kind of mother does that? I'd become a pariah. The woman who betrayed her child. The unnatural mother. The traitor. I'd lose what little family I had left. The Sunday visits would end. The phone calls would stop. That yellow nursery would sit empty forever. I'd never hold my grandson. Never see him take his first steps or hear his first words or watch him grow up. I'd die alone. Completely alone. And when they found my body weeks later, David wouldn't be at my funeral because he'd be in prison because of me. That was one choice. Or I could stay silent. Tell myself I'd misunderstood. That I was being paranoid. That David would never actually go through with it. That maternal instinct was making me see monsters where there were none. That I was just a lonely old woman desperate for family, and my desperation was making me imagine things that weren't real. I could pretend I hadn't heard that phone call. Hadn't seen the warning signs. Hadn't put together the pattern. I could smile and play grandma and let whatever was going to happen, happen. That would preserve my relationship with David. Would let me keep my grandson. Would let me have the family I'd been desperately lonely for. But it would kill Emily. And her baby. This innocent woman and innocent child would die because I chose my son over the truth. Because I valued my own comfort, my own desire for family, more than a human life. And I'd have to live with that. Every day for the rest of my life, I'd know that I let a young woman be murdered because saving her was inconvenient. Because it cost me too much. Because blood mattered more than justice. I'd have to look at my grandson and know that his mother had been murdered. That I could have stopped it and chose not to. That every moment I spent with him was built on the foundation of his mother's corpse. I'd have to look at myself in the mirror every morning and see a coward. A collaborator. Someone who knew evil was happening and chose to look away because standing up to it was too hard. What would you do? Seriously. Stop and think about it. If you discovered your own child was a monster, what would you do? Would you choose family over justice? Blood over innocence? Your own comfort over doing what's right? Or would you do what needed to be done, no matter the cost? I sat at that kitchen table for 3 hours. Drank 4 cups of coffee. Watched the sun come up through my kitchen window. Thought about Thomas and what he would say. Thought about every value I'd ever claimed to believe in. Thought about every person I'd helped put in prison for financial fraud and asked myself how this was any different. Those people had stolen money. David was stealing a life. Those people had forged signatures on documents. David was forging concern for a wife he was killing. Those people had betrayed trust for profit. David was betraying the most sacred trust there is, husband to wife, father to child, for $3 million and a future with his mistress. And I was his mother. The person who'd raised him. The person who'd taught him right from wrong. The person who'd enabled his lies and excuses and failures for decades because I loved him more than I loved the truth. Thomas had tried to warn me. "You're teaching him there are no consequences," he'd said. "You're teaching him he can get away with anything." Well, Thomas was right. I had taught him that. And now David believed he could get away with murder. Because his whole life, I'd shown him that love meant letting him escape consequences. That being family meant covering for him. That blood was thicker than accountability. I'd created this monster. By loving him wrong. By protecting him when I should have corrected him. By choosing to see the best in him when everyone else saw the worst. And now I had a choice. Continue the pattern and let him get away with murder. Or finally, hold him accountable for something. I'll tell you what I did. I chose Emily. I chose that baby. I chose truth over blood. I chose to be the mother my son needed 20 years ago, even if it was too late for him. And I chose to be the mother Emily needed right now, before it was too late for her. But I didn't call the police. Not yet. Because I'd worked in finance and law long enough to know that I overheard a phone call wasn't enough. Defense attorneys would rip it apart. She's a grief-stricken widow grasping at straws. She misheard. She misunderstood. She's desperate for attention. I needed evidence. Real, solid, undeniable evidence that would not only save Emily's life but put David away forever. Evidence so overwhelming that no jury could doubt it. Evidence so comprehensive that David couldn't talk his way out of it. I needed to become an investigator again. The person I'd been for 33 years. The person who found patterns and built cases and never gave up until she had the truth. So that's what I did. The next day, while David was at work, I drove to their apartment. I still had the spare key Emily had given me, in case of emergencies. This was an emergency. I let myself in. The apartment was small, messy, cluttered. Dishes in the sink. Laundry on the couch. The nursery half finished. I started in the bathroom. Found the pill bottles. 6 of them, all prescribed to Emily from 3 different doctors. But when I looked them up on my phone, I found the problem. Iron supplements, but double the recommended dose. Enough to cause organ damage over time. Blood pressure medication, but Emily didn't have high blood pressure. These would lower it dangerously, cause dizziness, weakness, fainting. Anti-nausea medication, but in combination with the others, they'd cause severe dehydration. This wasn't medical care. This was a recipe for slow death disguised as pregnancy complications. I took pictures of every bottle. Every label. Every dosage. In the bedroom, I found his laptop. Checked his search history because the idiot hadn't cleared it. How long does slow poisoning take? Pregnancy death statistics. Life insurance payout time frame. Untraceable poisons. How to fake concern for sick wife. I photographed every search. Every website. Every goddamn piece of evidence of his planning. In the closet, under a box of his old clothes, I found papers. Life insurance policy, $3 million, Emily as the insured, David as the beneficiary. Policy taken out 6 months ago, right after they got married. Application was in Emily's name but the signature didn't look quite right. I'd reviewed thousands of signatures in my career. This one was forged. I took pictures of everything. In his jacket pocket, I found a second phone. Cheap burner phone, the kind people use when they're doing something they don't want traced. I turned it on. Text messages to someone named Jay. Can't wait to be done with this. After the baby comes, a few weeks max. Then we can finally be together. She's so weak now she can barely stand. Nobody suspects a thing. Pictures of another woman. Blonde. Young. Smiling in David's apartment, in his bed, wearing his shirts. My son had a mistress. Was planning his pregnant wife's murder so he could be with his mistress and collect millions in insurance money. I photographed every message. Every picture. Every piece of his betrayal. But I needed more. I needed audio. I needed him saying it out loud. I bought a recording device online. Tiny thing, looks like a pen. 2-day shipping. Next Sunday, when they came over, I would get him talking. That Sunday, Emily looked like death. She could barely walk from the car to my door. Her skin was gray. Her eyes unfocused. Her hands trembling so badly she couldn't hold her water glass. David, she needs to go to the hospital, I said, trying to keep the fury out of my voice. She's fine, Mom. Just tired. The baby's getting big, putting pressure on everything. Totally normal. This is not normal. Look at her. Emily tried to smile. It's okay, Mama Magret. I just need to rest. David's taking good care of me. David's taking good care of me. He was killing her and she was defending him. After lunch, I suggested David help me with something in the garage. Led him away from Emily, who'd fallen asleep on the couch again. Son, we need to talk, I said, the recording pen in my pocket turned on. About what? About Emily. About what's really going on. His face changed. Went cold. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that your wife is dying and you don't seem concerned at all. I'm talking about all those pills you're giving her. I'm talking about that life insurance policy. He laughed. Actually laughed. Jesus, Mom. You're paranoid. Emily has pregnancy complications. The doctors are handling it. And the life insurance is standard. Everyone gets life insurance. $3 million is not standard. And I've seen what you've been searching online. His expression shifted. From denial to calculation. He was deciding whether to keep lying or to tell me the truth. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting an innocent woman from my monster of a son. Silence. Long, cold silence. Then he smiled. This horrible, empty smile that didn't reach his eyes. You can't prove anything, he said quietly. And even if you could, who's going to believe you? The lonely old widow desperate for attention? Making up stories about her own son because she's bitter and alone? I have evidence, David. No, you have paranoid delusions. And if you say anything to anyone, I'll make sure you never see that baby. I'll make sure Emily knows you're trying to destroy our family. She'll hate you. Everyone will hate you. You'll die alone in this house with no one. He leaned in close. So here's what you're going to do, Mom. You're going to shut your mouth. You're going to smile and play grandma. And in a few weeks, when Emily dies from tragic pregnancy complications, you're going to comfort me at the funeral like a good mother. Because if you don't, you lose everything. He patted my shoulder. I learned from the best. You taught me that there are always consequences. Well, here they are. Then he walked back inside to his dying wife. I stood in the garage, shaking with rage and horror, and I knew something with absolute certainty. I had raised a psychopath. And I was the only person who could stop him. That night, I called Patricia. My friend from work, the one I'd had coffee with every Thursday for the last 7 years. Patricia, I need help. Legal help. And I need you to not ask questions until I explain everything. Patricia had connections. Her son was a lawyer, her daughter was a doctor, her brother-in-law was a retired detective. She listened to everything, the recordings, the evidence, the threat, and she didn't hesitate. Magret, we're going to save that girl. And we're going to make sure your son never hurts anyone again. We built a plan. A careful, detailed, legally sound plan. First, we needed Emily safe. Patricia's daughter arranged for a trusted OBGYN to examine Emily privately. She documented the poisoning, the symptoms, the medications. She confirmed that Emily was being systematically poisoned and that, if it continued, she would die. Second, we needed to collect official evidence. Patricia's brother-in-law used his connections to get the pills tested. To pull the life insurance records. To trace the burner phone. To identify the mistress, a woman named Jennifer who worked at the same company as David and had been seeing him for over a year, before he even met Emily. Third, we needed to keep Emily alive long enough to execute the plan. Patricia's daughter prescribed actual prenatal vitamins, gave them to me in bottles that looked identical to the ones David had. I went to their apartment again while David was at work and switched them. Every bottle. The pills David thought were killing her were now keeping her and the baby healthy. Fourth, and this was the hard part, we needed Emily's cooperation. We needed her to understand what was happening and to trust us enough to fake her own death. 2 weeks before Christmas, I invited Emily to lunch. Just us. Told David I wanted special grandmother-granddaughter time before the baby came. He agreed, probably relieved to have a few hours with Jennifer. I took Emily to Patricia's house, where Patricia's daughter was waiting. We sat Emily down and we told her everything. She didn't believe us at first. Couldn't believe it. She loved David. He was her husband. The father of her baby. He would never. I showed her the recordings. The search history. The texts with Jennifer. The forged insurance policy. The pills he'd been giving her versus the pills that had been prescribed. She broke. Completely broke. Sobbed so hard she could barely breathe. This tiny, pregnant girl, betrayed by the man she loved, poisoned by the man she trusted. He was going to kill me, she kept saying. He was going to kill me and take my baby. He was, I said, holding her hands. But we're not going to let that happen. We're going to save you and your baby. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She looked at me with those big brown eyes full of tears and terror and she whispered, yes, Mama Magret. The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. Emily would continue to appear sick. We'd replace the poison pills, but she needed to keep acting like they were working. David had to believe she was still dying. We scheduled a home birth with Patricia's daughter attending as the midwife. David thought this was Emily's idea. She told him she wanted a natural, peaceful birth. He agreed immediately because it meant no hospital records, no doctors asking questions. The birth would happen at my house, not their apartment. Safer, I told them. More room. And David agreed because he wanted me involved, wanted me complicit when Emily died. After the birth, Emily would be declared dead. Postpartum complications. Hemorrhaging. Tragic but not uncommon. Patricia's daughter would sign the death certificate. She had the authority. It would be legal, official, filed with the state. Emily and the baby would be moved to a safe location, Patricia's daughter's house, 3 states away. Emily would recover there, hidden, while we gathered the final pieces of evidence needed to arrest David. The funeral would be the trap. Public. Recorded. Where David would expose himself in front of everyone he knew. And then, at the perfect moment, Emily would come back from the dead. Emily gave birth on December 18th. A healthy baby boy, 7 pounds 3 ounces. She named him Thomas, after my husband. It was the most beautiful and most terrible thing I've ever witnessed. This girl, this strong, brave girl, bringing life into the world while knowing she was about to die. Knowing she was about to leave her baby. Knowing that for her plan to work, she had to trust me, a woman she'd known for 3 months, with her child's life. David was there. Held her hand. Acted concerned. Whispered encouragements. Played the loving husband perfectly. And when the baby was born, he held his son and smiled, and my skin crawled. 2 hours later, Patricia's daughter came out of the bedroom looking devastated. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "She's bleeding. I can't stop it. You need to call an ambulance." David jumped up. "What? No. Emily. I'm calling 911, I said. "No." Patricia's daughter grabbed my arm. "It's too late. She's gone. I'm so sorry." The performance was flawless. I even believed it for a second. David stood there, holding his son, and his face was perfect. Shock. Grief. Horror. If I didn't know better, if I hadn't heard his planning, would have believed he was a devastated husband. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no. Emily. Baby, no." He went into the bedroom. Came out 5 minutes later with tears on his face. Real tears. He was that good. "She's gone, Mom. She's really gone." I held him while he cried. Held my son who'd murdered my daughter-in-law and felt nothing but cold, burning rage. Patricia's daughter handled everything. Death certificate filed. Funeral home contacted. Body removed, actually a weighted body bag filled with medical waste, taken to a crematorium owned by another of Patricia's connections who owed her a favor. The next week was a blur. David played the grieving widower. Posted on social media about his angel Emily. Accepted condolences. Made funeral arrangements. And through it all, he kept the baby. My grandson. Thomas. I visited every day. Brought food. Helped with the baby. Watched David feed and change and rock his son with such tender care that if I didn't know better, I'd think he actually loved him. But I did know better. I knew that baby was just part of the payout. The sympathy prop. The reason everyone would rally around him when the insurance money came through. I knew that eventually, when Thomas was old enough to be inconvenient, David would find a way to get rid of him too. The funeral was scheduled for December 28, 10 days after Emily's death. Long enough to be respectful. Short enough that David could collect the insurance and move on with his life. Patricia helped me plan every detail. Guest list. Seating. Audio/visual setup. I told David I wanted to give a eulogy. That I needed to say goodbye properly. He agreed, probably thinking it would make him look good. I bought a new dress. Black. Appropriate. Practiced my speech in front of the mirror. And I prepared a video. Hours and hours of editing. Building the case. Telling the story. Showing the evidence. The morning of the funeral, I woke up calm. Clear-headed. This was it. The moment I'd been building toward. The moment I would destroy my son to save an innocent life. Worth it. The church was full. David had invited everyone. His co-workers. His friends. Emily's few remaining family members. All of our neighbors. Everyone who'd watched his performance of grief. I got there early. Made sure the audio/visual equipment was set up correctly. Made sure the video file was loaded and ready. Made sure everything was perfect. People arrived. Hugged me. Told me how sorry they were. What a tragedy. So young. That poor baby. I smiled and thanked them and felt nothing. And then David arrived. He walked into that church at exactly 11 o'clock. Wearing a black suit. Carrying baby Thomas in a car seat. With Jennifer on his arm. The church went silent. Dead silent. Every head turned. Every eye widened. My son walked down the aisle of the church where his wife's funeral was about to begin, holding hands with his mistress, and he smiled. He actually smiled. Like he'd already forgotten. Like Emily was so far in his past that he could move on at her funeral. Like he'd won so completely that he didn't need to hide anymore. People started whispering. Pulling out phones. Recording. David took his seat in the front row. Jennifer next to him. Baby Thomas between them. Playing happy family while Emily's empty casket sat 15 feet away. I stood at the back of the church and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Because I knew what was about to happen. I knew that in the next 10 minutes, everyone in this room would see exactly who David Morrison really was. The service started. Hymns were sung. A pastor who'd never met Emily read generic words about death and heaven and peace. And then it was time for my eulogy. I walked to the front. Stood at the podium. Looked out at the full church. At David in the front row, holding Jennifer's hand, looking appropriately somber now that people were watching. "Thank you all for coming," I said. I know Emily would have been touched by this turnout. She was a special girl. Kind. Gentle. Trusting. I paused. Maybe too trusting. David's head lifted. Our eyes met. I'd been asked to say a few words about Emily. To share memories. To celebrate her life. But instead, I'm going to tell you the truth about how she died. Murmuring from the crowd. David half stood, like he was about to stop me. "Please, David. Sit down. Everyone needs to hear this." I nodded to Patricia, who was running the A/V system from the back. The screen behind me flickered on. "Emily didn't die from natural causes," I said. "She didn't die from pregnancy complications. She died because she was murdered." The church erupted. People gasping, talking, standing. She was murdered slowly, over months, by someone she trusted. Someone who promised to love her. Someone who gave her poison disguised as medicine. Someone who forged her signature on a $3 million life insurance policy. Someone who planned her death with his mistress. On the screen behind me, the video started playing. Pills. Search history. Text messages. Insurance documents. Audio recording of David threatening me in the garage. "Someone," I said, my voice rising over the chaos, "who is sitting in the front row of this church. Holding his mistress's hand. At his wife's funeral." David stood. "This is insane. Mom, you're having some kind of breakdown. This is grief talking. Everyone, please, she doesn't know what she's saying." I know exactly what I'm saying. I have evidence. The police have evidence. You're a murderer, David. And everyone here is going to watch the proof. The video continued. David's voice clear as day, "Once the baby comes, it'll be over soon." Jennifer's texts, "Can't wait until she's gone and we can be together." The forged signature. The poison pills. Everything. People were recording on their phones. Broadcasting live. The video was being seen by hundreds, thousands of people in real time. David's face changed. The mask dropped. No more grief. No more shock. Just cold, calculating rage. "You bitch," he hissed. "You had no right. I had every right. I'm a mother. And I chose to protect an innocent woman over protecting my monster of a son. She's dead. You can't prove anything. That video is circumstantial. I'll say you fabricated it, that you're senile." "You're right," I said calmly. "I can't prove murder when there's no body. That's why I made sure there wasn't one." Confusion flickered across his face. I smiled. "Emily isn't dead, David." The church went silent. Absolute, complete silence. "What?" he whispered. "Emily isn't dead. The birth was real. The bleeding was faked. The death certificate was faked. She's alive. And she's about to walk through those doors. I nodded to Patricia again. The church doors opened. And Emily walked in. Alive. Healthy. Carrying a diaper bag. The church exploded. People screaming, jumping up, phones everywhere. Emily walked down the aisle. Walked right past David, who stood frozen, his face the color of ash. Walked to the front and stood next to me. She looked at the crowd. "My name is Emily Morrison," she said, her voice shaking but strong. "And my husband tried to kill me." Then she took baby Thomas from Jennifer's arms, Jennifer who sat there looking like she might throw up, and she held her son close. "But I'm alive. Because this woman, my mother-in-law, saved me. She chose me over her own son. She chose truth over family." The police walked in. They'd been waiting outside. Patricia's brother-in-law had arranged everything. "David Morrison, you're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder." They handcuffed him right there. In front of everyone. In front of his co-workers and friends and neighbors and the phone cameras broadcasting everything. David didn't fight. Didn't argue. Just looked at me with pure hatred. "You'll regret this," he said as they led him away. "I'm your son." "No," I said. "You stopped being my son the moment you tried to kill an innocent woman. You're a stranger to me now." He was let out. Jennifer was arrested too. She'd known about the plan, had helped him research poisons, had encouraged the murder. And then it was just me and Emily and baby Thomas in a church full of stunned people. Emily turned to me. Tears streaming down her face. And she hugged me. "You saved us, Mama Magret. You saved our lives." I held her and the baby and I cried. Actually cried for the first time since this nightmare started. "No," I whispered. "I just became the mother you needed. The mother my son needed me to be years ago, before it was too late." The trial took 6 months. 6 long months of testimony and evidence and watching my son sit in that courtroom with his expensive lawyer, looking calm and composed, like this was all a misunderstanding that would blow over. David was convicted on all charges. Attempted murder. Insurance fraud. Conspiracy to commit murder. Forgery. Fraud. Dozens of other charges I can't even remember. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. 3 hours to decide that yes, this man had tried to murder his pregnant wife. 3 hours to determine that the evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, damning. I sat in that courtroom and listened to the verdict and felt nothing. Completely nothing. Not relief. Not vindication. Not even sadness. Just emptiness. He got 25 years to life. Minimum. Wouldn't be eligible for parole until he was 63 years old. By then I'd be 94, if I was still alive. Jennifer got 10 years for conspiracy. She cried when they announced her sentence. Begged the judge for mercy. Said she'd been manipulated, that David had convinced her Emily was a bad person, that she didn't know he was actually going to kill her. The prosecutor played recordings of her and David discussing how much insurance money they'd have. Texts where she'd researched untraceable poisons and sent David links. Photos of them together in hotels while Emily was home sick, dying from the very poisons Jennifer had helped him research. She stopped crying after that. Emily testified. That was the hardest part. Watching this tiny, fragile woman sit in that witness box and describe what had been done to her. How she'd trusted her husband completely. How she'd thought the illness was normal. How she'd been so focused on the baby that she didn't realize she was being murdered. "I would have died," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "If Mama Magret hadn't saved me, I would have died and no one would have questioned it. Pregnancy complications. That's what they would have said. And my son would have grown up without a mother, raised by the man who killed her." David stared at the table the whole time she testified. Never looked up. Never showed any emotion. The sentencing hearing was worse. The judge asked David if he had anything to say. He stood up, looked right at me, and smiled. My mother always taught me that family comes first. That blood is thicker than water. That you stand by your own no matter what. He paused. Guess she didn't really believe that, did she? The judge told him to sit down. But David kept talking. You want to know what kind of woman turns in her own son? A selfish one. A lonely one who was so desperate for a grandchild that she stole mine. This whole thing is a fabrication. Emily and my mother planned it together. They wanted to get rid of me and keep my son. Even his lawyer looked uncomfortable. The prosecutor objected. The judge threatened contempt of court. But David just smiled at me and said, I hope you're happy, Mom. I hope my son is worth destroying your own child for. Then he sat down. That was the last time he spoke to me for 3 years. Emily and baby Thomas live with me now. In that house that was too big and too empty for so long. We've filled it with laughter and mess and toys scattered everywhere and all the noise and chaos of a toddler learning about the world. That yellow nursery is finally being used. Finally serving the purpose Thomas and I intended 20 years ago. Little Thomas, named after my husband, a man who died before he was born but who would have loved him fiercely, sleeps in the crib we bought together. Plays with toys we've accumulated over 2 years of birthdays and holidays. Looks out the window at the garden his great-grandfather planted and points at birds and clouds and airplanes. Thomas is 2 years old now. He calls me Grandma. Runs to me when I come home from the grocery store. Asks me to read him the same book 17 times in a row. Falls asleep in my arms when he's tired. He has Emily's eyes, big and brown and full of wonder. Emily's smile that lights up his whole face. And thank God, none of David's features that I can see. I know that's terrible to think. I know he's half David genetically. But when I look at him, I don't see my son. I see a new person. A chance to do this right. Emily is in nursing school. She says she wants to help people the way Patricia's daughter helped her. Wants to be the person who sees what others miss, who asks the right questions, who saves lives. She's dating someone now. A man named Marcus who works in IT at the hospital where she's doing her clinicals. He's kind. Patient. Good with Thomas. He knows her whole story, knows her husband tried to kill her, knows she faked her own death, knows I'm the mother-in-law who destroyed her son to save her. And he loves her anyway. Loves Thomas too. Treats him like his own. I watch them together and I see a real family forming. The kind David could have had if he'd been capable of actual love instead of just performance. Some people in town don't talk to me anymore. Mrs. Henderson next door hasn't spoken to me since the trial. She waves politely, but that's it. No more casual conversations over the fence. No more bringing me vegetables from her garden. I know what she thinks. I can see it in her face. That's the woman who betrayed her own son. The bridge group dissolved. Joan and Helen sided with Patricia and me. Said I did the right thing. Said they'd have done the same. But 2 other women quit. Said they couldn't sit across from someone who turned in their own child. What if our kids did something wrong? Would you turn us in too? How can we trust you? I lost neighbors. Lost acquaintances. Lost people I thought were friends. But most people understand. Most people know I did the right thing. The grocery store clerk who squeezes my hand when I check out. The librarian who thanks me every time I volunteer. The young mothers at the park who've started sitting with Emily and me, letting their kids play with Thomas, including us in their group. You saved her life, one of them told me. You're a hero. Patricia says I'm a hero. Says what I did took more courage than most people have. Says she's proud to know me. Says Thomas would be proud too. I don't feel like a hero. I feel like a mother who failed catastrophically at the most important job she ever had, raising a decent human being, and then had to clean up the consequences in the worst way possible. I visit David once a year. On his birthday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. Always made his birthday parties interesting when he was a kid. All the stores were full of hearts and flowers and romance, and we'd be buying dinosaur decorations and superhero cakes. I don't know why I still visit. Maybe because some part of me still loves him. Some deep, primal part of me that remembers holding him as a baby, feeding him, rocking him to sleep. Some part that will always see him as my child, no matter what he's become. Maybe because I need to remind myself that I did the right thing. That the alternative, letting Emily die, would have been worse. That choosing truth over blood was the only moral choice. Maybe because I keep hoping that someday he'll look at me and I'll see remorse. Understanding. Some acknowledgement that what he did was evil and that I had no choice. But he never does. He sits across from me in the prison visiting room. Orange jumpsuit. Handcuffs. Dead eyes. And says nothing. For 3 years, he wouldn't even sit at the table with me. Would refuse the visit entirely. The guards would bring him out and he'd see me and turn around and leave. But in year 4, he started showing up. Started sitting down. But he won't speak. Won't look at me. Just sits there for the full 30 minutes in total silence. I talk anyway. Tell him about Thomas. About how he's growing. About his first words, mama, grandma, dog. About his first steps. About how he loves dinosaurs just like David did at that age. About how he's smart and curious and kind. I don't know if David listens. His face never changes. But I talk anyway. I tell him that Emily is doing well. That she's going to be a nurse. That she's happy. That she's met someone good who treats her the way she deserves to be treated. I tell him that I'm sorry. That I wish things had been different. That I wish I'd raised him better, seen the warning signs earlier, gotten him help before it was too late. I tell him that I still love him. That he's still my son. That nothing will ever change that, even though I can never forgive what he tried to do. He never responds. Never reacts. Just stares at the table until the 30 minutes are up, and then he stands and leaves without a word. That's okay. I don't need him to forgive me. I don't need him to understand. I don't need him to acknowledge that I did the right thing. I need to sleep at night knowing I chose truth over blood. Justice over family. An innocent life over my own child. And I do sleep. Better than I did during those 7 years alone in that empty house. Better than I did during the months when I knew what David was doing and was gathering evidence. Better than I slept during the trial when I watched my son's life unravel in public. Now I sleep in a house full of life. Where a toddler might wake me up at midnight because he had a bad dream. Where Emily might knock on my door in the early morning to ask if I want coffee. Where the sounds are laughter and crying and running footsteps and everything that was missing for so long. Would you have done the same? If your son, your daughter, your own flesh and blood, became a monster, if they were actively hurting someone, killing someone, would you turn them in? Would you destroy them to save a stranger? Or would you choose family, no matter the cost? I think about that question a lot. Late at night, when the house is quiet and Emily and Thomas are asleep upstairs. When I sit in this kitchen where I used to sit alone for so many years, where I now sit surrounded by baby toys and sippy cups and hand-drawn pictures on the refrigerator and evidence of life being lived. I think about David. About the sweet little boy who brought me stolen flowers from Mrs. Henderson's garden. About the 5-year-old who made me burnt toast on Mother's Day. About the 7-year-old who wanted to be a paleontologist and name a dinosaur after me. I think about where I went wrong. What I missed. How he became the man who could plan his pregnant wife's murder without a shred of guilt. Was it nature? Was he born with something broken inside him? Or was it nurture? Did I fail him so completely that he never learned empathy, never developed a conscience, never understood that other people were real and mattered? Thomas says I enabled him. That I taught him there were no consequences. That I chose short-term peace over long-term accountability. Thomas was right. I did enable him. I did teach him that. And I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But I also think about that moment. That moment when I chose Emily over him. When I looked at the evidence and knew what I had to do and did it anyway, knowing it would destroy my son, knowing it would destroy me too. That moment when I became the person who saves strangers instead of protecting family. And I wonder if I'm a hero or a monster myself. If choosing justice over blood makes me righteous or unnatural. If there's something wrong with me that I could do this to my own child, or if there's something wrong with people who couldn't. The mothers who've stopped talking to me, they think I'm a monster. They think a real mother would have protected her son no matter what. Found another way. Hidden the evidence. Warned him to stop. Something. Anything other than what I did. And maybe they're right. Maybe there is something broken in me. Maybe a normal mother couldn't have done what I did. Couldn't have methodically gathered evidence against her own child. Couldn't have planned a fake death and a public exposure. Couldn't have stood in that church and destroyed her son's life in front of everyone he knew. Maybe I'm not a hero at all. Maybe I'm just a broken woman who loved a stranger more than her own blood. But then Thomas wakes up crying and I hear Emily's footsteps overhead. And I go upstairs to help. I rock my grandson back to sleep in the nursery that's finally being used the way Thomas and I always dreamed. And Emily comes in, worried that he's sick or hurt, and we sit together in the soft glow of the nightlight. And I hold my grandson, this beautiful little boy who wouldn't exist if I hadn't acted, who wouldn't have a mother if I'd chosen differently, and I know I made the right choice. Because family isn't just blood. Family is choosing to protect the innocent. Family is choosing to do the right thing, even when it destroys you. Family is being the mother that someone needs, even if they're not your child. Family is Emily calling me mama and meaning it. Family is Thomas reaching for me when he's scared. Family is this house full of love and laughter instead of silence and loneliness. Family is choosing truth over blood. Justice over loyalty. Innocence over guilt. My name is Magret Elizabeth Morrison. I'm 69 years old now. My son is in prison for trying to murder his wife. My daughter-in-law lives with me. My grandson calls me grandma. And I sleep just fine at night. I chose truth over blood. I chose justice over family. I chose to save an innocent life over protecting my own child. And I would do it again. Every single time. Because that's what it means to be a mother. Not protecting your child no matter what they do. But teaching them, even when it's too late, that actions have consequences. That evil is evil regardless of who does it. That love doesn't mean enabling. That family doesn't mean covering up crimes. Being a mother means loving your child enough to hold them accountable. Even when it breaks you. Even when it costs you everything. So I'll ask you one more time. If your own child became a monster, would you expose them to save someone innocent? Would you choose truth over family? Would you save the life of a stranger at the cost of your own blood? Think carefully before you answer. Because someday, you might have to make that choice. And when that day comes, you'll find out exactly what kind of person you really are. You'll find out if you're the type who protects monsters because they share your DNA. Or if you're the type who protects innocence, no matter the cost. I know which type I am. And I can live with that.